Good yourself.
Good.
Hello, everyone. Oh, there we go. We've got heaps. Of course, as usual, Chris McCall. It's late. Hey, Peter, Andrew, David, Tanya,
Kath,
Paul.
you're with us,
Eve.
Kath. Hey, Kath.
Yep, Julie, Kath, Tennille, Lisa, Andrew, the BS Bennett. I like how it comes up like that, Brad. Chris.
Nothing wrong with the
Awesome.
initials BS.
No, that's all right. Oh, there we go. We've got Heidi and Tom joining us as well. There we go.
Nice. And we've got Lisa and Andrew from Kirinari. Welcome.
Yeah, hello, folks. Just letting everyone, hopefully the internet bandwidth will survive here.
Ed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, looks like we're all good to go. I'll turn that
And
off.
hopefully everyone's right to put cameras on so we can all see each other.
Lights. Yep. I'm getting some delays here.
Lights.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Okay,
Brad,
awesome.
Chris.
Wonderful. Tom, Lisa, Andrew. Awesome. I know there's a couple more that might drift in dribs and drabs, but let's do it, guys, because it's a really good turnout this month.
And we'll try and get as many cameras on as possible. It'll be wonderful to see everyone's faces. Thanks. If
sorry,
if
I can't put mine on, guys. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay, Andrew. We've got a couple more coming in. Okay, there we go. I'll just wait till everyone's in. Got a couple of people dragging themselves through the.
How you going, Chris? Good to see you.
Yes, good to see you too, Bron. I'm not too bad, thank you.
That's the way.
How Licky's got going on today. Looking stylish, mate.
Oh no, just like to flick it
of the
back
hair.
for you.
I'm obviously
it's just to make you jealous, Quills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, come on, Paul. Surely you can give the hair a little flick and,
I've got the super close-up for you as well, mate. So,
Hey, Quills, let your hair down, mate. There you go. That's a dad joke.
This is it. This is it.
Wow.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, my connection's about to drop out, mate. There's
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, guys, and thank you for making yourselves available again. So, welcome back to 2023 for the community of risk management. So, Bron, do you want to say something? I often talk too much as it is.
No, it's okay. Well, actually, when we were doing the prep for this session today, we actually started this in 2019. So there you go. So community of risk management going strong for 2023. And really pleased to have everyone here. We've got some exciting plans for the community of risk management for 2023, including some changes about it's the technology solution to deliver it. But we're really pleased to have everyone back and hopefully going to bring you some exciting topics.
Not hopefully, definitely will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, given that we designed them, we think they're great.
Oh yeah, of course. And yeah, I don't know what people thought of that new tagline, but we've been fiddling with stuff about real conversations, real people without the fluff, because I feel like the whole world, all of us live in around this risk and let's call it risk and governance space. It's just inhabited by this horrible, vortex of acronyms and buzzwords and things like that. And so hopefully this can be
real, people.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't. Exactly. So look, just really briefly, so today, look, we want to give the bulk of the conversation to talking, hopefully as a really open conversation about this whole notion of psychosocial hazards and then how to prevent them at work, and I guess what the landscape is, how it's changed, what our advice would be to you guys and girls for 2023 for your business, given that realistically, there's a bunch of stuff happening in this area. But before that, look, or just very briefly in summary, we'll give you details in some more formal communications in the coming months. But what we're looking to do over the course of 2023 is really look to continue to build that global audience theme for the community of risk management. And so what that means is for those that are in different time zones, I think it's only Brad and Tennille with us today that are in non-New South Wales or non-Eastern Standard time zones, I think. One of the things we're probably going to be looking at doing is running 2 of these calls a month to try and address some of the demand from some of our colleagues in Europe and North America, because obviously in the UK in the moment, someone, Ed, help me out, it's probably 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning or something along those lines.
Very unfriendly time for a Zoom call.
Yeah, so we'll probably be looking at incorporating a second event, like a mirror event each month at that, probably around that 4 p.m. mark, to capture the European audience. And then we're also looking at the best forum to bring everyone together to really push it forward to try and make it truly a global community for risk and governance professionals. So that obviously we can probably, for those that know Rupert, we can bring people like Rupert and others from that UK, Europe, US time zone back into the fold. Would be an amazing thing to do. So that's one thing. And then look, we're obviously imminently ourselves looking to, 208 in London. Thanks, Ed. Imminently going to be launching some of our content professionally online as well. We'll keep you in the loop on that as well. And Bron, well, I don't know, that's probably enough for the moment, isn't it?
That's enough about us. Yeah.
It's not about us. We're boring. So
we got creative over the Christmas break and now we're all excited about it. So.
Yeah, exactly. So look, let's just launch into it because we all know what we're here for today.
Yeah.
So hopefully everyone can see that.
Up.
Yeah, can everyone see?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, excellent. I'll just
get
put
it in present.
Okie dokie. So welcome back, everyone. As we said, we're really absolutely excited to have you here, and thanks for giving us your time. It's always a great conversation, a great space, and
and who doesn't love a minion, really?
Exactly. Everyone loves him. Everyone loves a minion. But look, and probably the only other thing worth mentioning is we want this to be very much as it has been for some time, I guess we want it to be even better, very much a forum where it's driven by the problems or the issues that you guys are having. So we're going to be probably pushing you a lot in amongst all the technological changes to also give us some more active feedback. So we want to know, what are the problems you're having? We really want to know, what are the topics you want to know about? And thirdly, what are the things that we can do to assist you collectively or individually to make your job easier or more effective? They're the kind of things we're probably going to be a bit pushier with you this year about, not because of there's any underlying reason, just because we want the group's agenda to be driven by the issues that the group is facing. That's right. So if it's not relevant to you, and I can see a few people in the audience today who we've chatted to over the back of last year, we want to make the topics as relevant to you, because if they're not useful or relevant, you're not going to turn up. So. Yeah.
And we've got some thought starters at the end of this session about some prompts or things that we think might prompt you thinking about giving us some feedback. So,
yeah.
Cool.
Okay. And then I'll just change this again. It always gets a bit funky on present. I'll just add Rebecca back in. Okay. Sorry, my share's just gone a little bit silly for a second. There we go. Okay, and so house rules, I think most of us already know, around camera and mic on as much as you can. Keep it sort of Chatham House when it comes to the discussion. Contribute, be respectful, have fun, and don't take yourself too seriously. And on that note, I think I can hear someone's mic echoing, so if they wouldn't mind doing the mute, that would be awesome. Thanks. And look, let's get into it.
So, okay, you're right if I kick off then?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So, all right, well, we probably already know that workplace psychological safety has become an absolute priority for all organisations, all industries right across Australia. So this has been driven historically from one of the recommendations made by Marie Boland in her report on the review of WHS in Australia back in 2018. We covered some of the outcomes from the Boland review at Community of Risk Management September last year, but she recommended that psychological hazards, risks and control measures be included in WHS legislation. So all the states agreed to adopt this recommendation, and subsequently many of the safety regulators have now formalised their code of practice for managing psychosocial hazards at work, after Safe Work Australia issued their model code in July 2022. So all the state-based regulators that have issued a code, not all of them have, but most of them have. Queensland come into effect in April. They've got it on their webpage, so does Safe Work Australia. They've got their model code up on their webpage. But as we know, given that it's a code of practice, it's considered reasonably practicable for all duty holders of PCBUs to know about it, the hazards and the risks, and to take reasonable action to implement it in their workplace. So there's quite a strong onus on organisations to take action here. In addition to this, a number of safety regulators have included... You're right? Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
sorry, it was just jumping around. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, okay. So in addition, a number of safety regulators have included the management of psychological risks as a compliance priority in their 2023 program of works. And now some of these got published about a month, 6 weeks ago. Both Safe Work New South Wales and the New South Wales Resources Regulator have listed it as one of their compliance priorities. So, and they've got this information on their webpage, and no doubt, I'm sure other safety regulators are following suit. So organisations now need to ensure that their WHS management systems include the management of both physical and psychological safety aspects. Coupled with this, the Respect at Work legislation, which came into effect in December 22, after being passed by Parliament, places a positive duty on PCBUs or employers to proactively prevent sexual harassment, discrimination and victimisation in the workplace, and that's Commonwealth legislation. We'll cover that off in a little bit more detail later in this presentation. But suffice to say, these two things working together place urgency on all organisations to respond. So if you haven't already done your risk assessment, now is the time to get cracking.
And I think it's probably just important to note that the big change for all of this stuff is that it used to be relatively reactive, as you said, Bron, that you could largely get away with addressing incidents when they occurred. However, now it's very much this positive duty, which means that there's an expectation of a proactive approach. And then I'll cover off a little bit briefly on the Respect at Work bill as we go through.
Yeah. So it's not enough really to just to have EAP and deal with that. You have to do more on the preventative side of things. So that's a really important distinction to make there.
Yeah, and I was just before we jump into it as well, is there anyone that's still, I feel like we're probably at the point now with this group that most of us have got their heads around why they use the term psychosocial for the code of practice and not not psychological. Is there anyone that's still sort of lacking clarity on that? Because again, I was deliberately being a smart ass with that LinkedIn post this morning. I feel like psychosocial is up there with social distancing for me. It's one of those buzzwords that I look at, I just shake my head every time I see it. But I think the reality is that the reason why they've used psychosocial, and if you look into the psychological definition of it, it's largely driven by the fact that it's where the way a work is done, including the physical environment the work is conducted in, the psychological features of the workplace, whether it be, job control, hierarchy, structure, culture, all of those things kind of get mushed together to create this term psychosocial hazard, which then results in a psychological injury. And again, we're not going to cover off the workers' comp today, but important to just kind of recognise that definition and how they're two distinctly separate terms.
Because we're going to see more and more of them, and so it's probably good to use them, I guess, in context. But I still tend to use them a bit interchangeably, so I must do better.
Yeah. Oh, I think we all do. And even I feel like if you say for any of us, and I'm thinking, Brad, Rebecca, Tennille, any of us that deal with sort of industry type workforces, you say a word like psychosocial to a bunch of buffets, and they're probably going to look at you and go, what's that? What's that? Toss a word about now, So you've got to be able to very quickly make it simple and understandable for all audiences, or otherwise you're going to get lost in this sea of acronyms. See, there we go. Or acronyms and buzzwords. So
I feel bingo coming on. Okay, so the code of practice itself, just very briefly, because I'm sure a lot of you now have taken the opportunity to have a look at it. But apart from all the usual information related to requirements for duty holders and obligations consultation and doing a risk assessment, it actually does have some really good information in it. And in particular, the Safe Work New South Wales code, it's very comprehensive. So it does have a list of workplace hazards that should be considered, and they cover things like discrimination, bullying, occupational violence, role overload, role underload, lack of role clarity, conflict between workers, remote and isolated work, amongst others. So there is lots and lots of hazards, and they break them down and talk to them in a bit of detail. So it's good to have a look at that. And then in the code, when you go to the Appendix A, there's actually some really good breakdowns by industry, which talks about specific hazards for industry. And so particularly anyone who might be in like healthcare or that frontline work, hospitality, retail, it breaks down about, I think about 10 different industries. It does go into mining and those sorts of things as well. It actually has really good list of hazards, risks, and it suggests some risk controls for you. So definitely take the time to have a look. And there's also a sample risk register in Appendix B. So it's, it's reasonably comprehensive in terms of being, a code of practice. And I think that they've done a really good job on it. But invariably, when we talk to our clients about a psychological injury, often, people sort of go back to the whole, well, I talked to someone and I gave them some feedback and then they went off on a psych injury kind of thing. Albeit they're a little bit harder to get across the line these days, but it is important to talk about reasonable management action, and the code does cover it. Although the code only gives you a bit of a brief, and it does refer you to the Fair Work Commission, who has very good guidance on what reasonable management action is. But things like giving feedback, directing work, disciplinary action, performance coaching, when they're done lawfully, that's important, when they're done lawfully, these actions are not considered bullying and harassment. So they don't contribute under law to a psychological injury. But it is important that leaders and supervisors and managers are equipped well to do these things, because if they don't do it the right way and they don't do it lawfully and with the right attitude and intent, then you'll wander off into a space that becomes very grey. So it is important that organisations coach and support leaders to do these things. But just having a discussion with someone about something they've done or a task, or directing them to do something, whilst they might not like it, does not actually contribute to being bullying harassment and is considered reasonable management action. So anyway, have a look. It's got it in the code, and then click the link and go into the Fair Work Commission, because there's a bit of information there about that.
And I think, and I was going to say, and I think I know Chris and others have talked with us at length about this in previous related presentations or conversations we've had in this forum, is about this absolutely critical need to have really clearly documented internal policies around performance management, and then making sure that you're following them rigidly, and particularly within that you're also then documenting it. Because if you think about any of the real moments that we've seen even in the last 3 months in this space, it's always been where there's some sort of, I would say, largely informal performance management that's been going on, and it's not recorded anywhere. And then it escalates into this space, and inevitably, I will say sarcastically, if you look at the code of practice and I was an employer, or, hazard a guess to say a union delegate, I'd look at that and go, isn't this a lovely guideline, step by step, on how I can make sure that one of my rank and file members successfully can mount a psychological claim against someone? And taking the sarcasm out of that, it really only just emphasises the need for employers to understand that if the unions and other, let's call it, nefarious parties out there are diving into this, you'd be mad not to be across it yourself and make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can to protect yourselves as employers, irrespective of that broader need to make sure that you are creating a physical and psychologically safe workplace in general, because we know that's a better place to work and that's where people want to work. So
yeah, and it's all about organizational culture, but having that really great, consultative organizational culture supported by managers, supervisors, and leaders who actually have had some professional development in how to host these kind of conversations will go a long way, so that organizations don't sort of fall into this space. But it isn't a free-for-all, I guess, and it is important to understand that there are some things that are considered to be reasonable management action. Otherwise you couldn't run your business. It's give and take with everybody. It's a two-way street here, and I think that concept of reasonable management action recognizes that as well.
Yep. Okay, so that's me. So look, I didn't want to stray out of the lane on this, because I know we've got plenty of very skilled IR and other related legal professionals in the room. And I think, look, the Respect at Work report, I don't know, sort of quick show of hands, has anyone sort of glanced at or seen the summary of that in terms of, like 44 plus recommendations? So obviously that's what drove this Respect at Work bill. And I think as of December last year, that bill was passed through both of the Houses of Parliament. And so in effect, that, based on what I can garner at the moment, that gives us till about December this year to be across this stuff as organisations, or otherwise, obviously separately to Safe Work Australia, separately to any state-based safety regulators, this aspect would be within the jurisdiction of the Human Rights Commission. And so I think
this Commonwealth legislation.
That's right. And so I think the important point that I really only want to emphasise here for all of us as risk and governance and or safety professionals is that the relevance of this Respect at Work bill means that, in effect, it now considers harassment to be a safety risk, and that's where the connection is directly to what we're talking about with this psychosocial hazards at work. And again, what it really means is that previously we might have needed to only go so far as to have incident investigation, area processes in place for when it occurs. Now there's this same proactive duty placed on us as organisations to prevent it. And so the best way to prevent it is to effectively recognise it within that risk management framework that is offered as the best way forward in this psychosocial hazard code of practice. So I guess that's probably all I need to mention about that. There's a ton of really good information out there on it. I think, did we send the link, the smart company link? So there's a smart company link out there that I can send to you guys if anyone's interested, that goes through this blow by blow, and it is quite complicated. That's probably the précis of the important and relevant bits for everyone in the room today, and how it links to safety and psychosocial hazards at work.
Yeah, but on the respectatwork.gov.au page, there is actually really good resources for organisations, including some e-learning modules and some fact sheets and those sorts of things. So if you want to know more about it, go to that webpage and have a look and do some of the e-learning modules, because there's quite good resources there to help everybody understand what's required, what's in, what's out, what's changed, that sort of stuff. So go there and have a look.
Yeah. Okay, it's done this again. All right. There we go. Okay.
And I hope everyone's liking the GIF. So I designed this particular Menti deck, and I'm feeling like I've lifted my GIF game.
Now you got to move to memes.
Yeah, lots of those. So when you think about all of this kind of information and you go, well, what do I really do? What am I actually going to do now about all of this? And so these are our kind of 6 or 7 steps that we think is important for people to follow, because you do have this positive duty to do something about it. You do have to be proactive about it. You can't just have EAP and respond with some counselling after the event. You have to be on the front foot with this. And so these are our kind of recommendations about how to help you take a proactive approach. So firstly, review all the information that's out there online on the web pages. Take full advantage of the free resources and training that is on offer. Make sure that you tap into all of those resources out there. So be informed, and then that is going to help you inform your management teams, your leadership teams, your executives around what you need to do. So also review and update your policies covering workplace safety to ensure that they reflect both physical and psychological safety. Make sure that they are communicated and implemented. So as we all know, there's often a disconnect between a policy that sits as a piece of shelfware and something that's been brought to life and in place in the organisation. So it's not enough to have a policy and hope and cross your fingers that people look at it. You actually need to make sure it's in use, communicated and implemented. Complete your risk assessment on psychological hazards and risks. We recommend actually using the bow tie methodology for this, because this is going to give you really good clarity on the preventative controls and then the mitigating controls. So that's why we recommend a bow tie. Not only is it easy to use, but it'll give you your front foot preventative controls. And that's where you really need to be on this one.
Yeah, and I think, some smarty pants we know in the financial sector was suggesting, I don't know if all of us are familiar with these things called Monte Carlo analysis, but chances are you're not going to have the data to do a Monte Carlo analysis like a bank when it comes to psychological or psychosocial hazards. So keep it simple and practical, and bow ties are great. And I think the experience we've seen so far with this is usually a lot of organisations, for those that aren't familiar with bow ties, you've got preventative controls on one side and mitigating controls on the other. Most organisations come up really short in the preventative control space around psychosocial, but they've got a ton in the mitigating controls in terms of, incident investigations, EAP, performance monitoring, all this sort of stuff. And it's an interesting visual exercise for them to kind of go, oh, there's a big fat gap here. And then that will drive action to hopefully push it in the direction where there is better preventative controls.
Yeah. And we've actually got a short video on how to do a bow tie risk assessment. So if you want it, reach out to us afterwards and we can flick it to you. Or I think it's sitting on our YouTube still.
Yeah, it's getting on a bit now, and it's pretty daggy, Dad, but it takes you through the basics. So
there's an idiot wearing a bow tie telling people how to do a bow tie,
exactly.
And I'm not in it.
Yeah, that's right.
Just saying is all.
Yeah, well, every village has their idiot problem, don't they?
Takes a village. Yeah. So, okay. Now, next thing, role model positive and respectful behaviours, and ensure that your actions and words are aligned to your desired culture and, your policy and those sorts of things. So it's one thing to have a policy, but it is really important that the behaviours, custom and culture support what it is that you're trying to achieve. So that's really important. Explore the use of technology and use it to maximum effect to connect with remote workers or those working from home. So do things like encouraging coffee catch-ups over Zooms, or find other avenues to connect informally. This working from home, people do feel isolated, particularly those that maybe live on their own as well. It is really important that we connect with our people that might still be working from home, and use things like Garmin or Strava and have a team challenge, or do something fun and use your technology solutions as a way of sort of team bonding and bringing people together. And then the other thing that we're suggesting is find your credible internet resources to support your workers with building on the pillars of good mental health, that being exercise, sleep, diet and social connectedness. So it's interesting, we came across a report done by some universities in America, and the report was issued last year, and they were talking about using meditation and mindfulness apps for team and individual use, and bringing teams together to do these things, and the success that some organisations in the US were having with that. And there's also other information out there on health.gov.au, for example, on diet and nutrition. And of course, there's always resources around Lifeline, Beyond Blue. And so use all the resources out there as well to connect with your teams, make sure teams feel are feeling good and they're building on their pillars of good mental health. So there are suggestions of things that you can do at, a very practical level in terms of risk assessments and policies and procedures, but some other things that you can do more proactively to kind of, bring people together and make them feel well supported.
Yeah, and I was going to say, adding to that as well, I think what, look, certainly I often underappreciate it or have in the past. I think this can feel so like nebulous and ethereal, this whole space, and it's like, oh, we did a fitness challenge and we got some fruit and we gave everyone fitness passport and we made sure that everyone spoke nicely to each other, and then it's still hard to go, okay, well, did we actually do anything meaningfully to make a difference? Like, how can we actually genuinely see whether that has any tangible or quantifiable benefit in terms of whether reduction in the amount of psychological claims or improvement in performance? The research that isn't necessarily out in public at the moment, but certainly seems to be pointing in this direction, that's only available to us, and it's in let's call it in the professional sporting space, is that when organizations in terms of professional sporting teams focus on really basic pillars for their athletes around things like diet, management of money, a whole bunch of other different things that they do, what they don't necessarily realize at the time is that has a huge indirect and direct benefit on psychological well-being for the athletes, and therefore results in a considerable improvement in performance. And so for someone like me that's a sports fanatic, the sell for me is, all right, we'll think about it less about saving ourselves money, and actually is the sell more around trying to go, well, we want to lift performance of our organization to the best possible level. One of the ways we can do it is really looking at this stuff and getting it right, because it's not necessarily just about avoidable compliance costs. It's actually about trying to maximize performance for the organization. And so hopefully that research body of knowledge will continue to build there to say that, if you're focusing on these aspects that we're talking about here within this psychosocial space, you're actually going to get a way better performance out of your team in terms of your organization. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah.
So, and I can send the link. It's mostly like American sports. I think Manchester United's in the group in round ball football, but then there's a bunch of American NFL teams, some hockey teams in Canada, and they've all participated in this kind of fairly significant research, which all directly links to that. So if anyone's interested,
round ball football. We call that soccer, don't we?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to be inclusive, Roman. Not everyone realizes that the god of all sports is AFL and, worships at the altar. So
Well, maybe not AFL, mate, but
yeah. So there we go.
Got me in quickly.
Now, who's getting a psychological injury over the football
I was just about to say, we can bring. I actually think you're right there, and it's just looking at and we see it all the time where there's the collision of life into work. So if you sort out some of those factors or assist in taking those off the table, you have someone happier at work. So that's essentially what that research sort of provides. You see the other way, when life is in turmoil, that person is quite often unsettled, for want of a better phrase, within the workplace. And I'm sure we've all known team members that's what happened with. So
I think it happens both ways. And I was thinking about, I don't know if Brad's still with us, back in the Boggabri days, the simple example I could give is, well, if you were to say focus on effective financial planning and literacy training for young young people in the mining industry, then that can potentially have a positive reduction effect in the amount of psychological injuries that you see in the workplace, because obviously stresses related to money and finance has such a significant detrimental effect on someone's psychological health, and then the reverse as well. So if they're under stress from a money perspective, then it's more likely to present as a psychological injury in the workplace. And again, that sports research, it all seems to be like kind of circular, and I don't know what the term is, like, positive confirmation loops. So it's just, it's fascinating, fascinating stuff. Yeah,
And
you're
you see, a really simple example is if you've ever worked with a colleague that's gone through a divorce, that's been quite messy. You know, they're a little bit messy at work for a while that sorts itself out.
That's right.
And there's that real blurring of the lines, isn't there, between sort of what's home and what's work, and it all sort of folds together. And then there's people still suffering from, you know, psychological impacts from COVID that hasn't gone away either. There's just a whole lot of stuff going on in this space. And so if we focus on the whole person to the benefit of the whole business, do you know what I mean? Like there's got to be plus for everyone here.
I think the best way I can describe it from COVID is probably people are just a bit fragile. So
that's a good way of looking at it. You may
not see an issue that's related to COVID, but they're a lot more fragile to something that maybe wouldn't have impacted them, you know, in 2018. So anyway, I'll let you keep on presenting. And
no, that's okay. That's okay. Well, I mean,
it's a sport they play in heaven, mate. That was all I was.
couldn't resist. There's that little dagger, and I can look around. I can see there's plenty of committed leagueies in the room as well that'd like throw rocks at me if they could as well. So
anyway, but I'm actually really interested in any thoughts from the floor in relation to. You know, what are your organisations doing, or have they done anything, or have you done a risk assessment, or what have you implemented, or if you come up with anything interesting in the risk control space that the group would benefit from hearing about? I'd love to hear from you guys around what's going on in your worlds.
Yeah, because let's keep it going, because it's really it's here for you guys to have great conversations. So you're right, Brian. I'll stop the share for a second and just go back to open discussion. So we'd love to hear from the group what's happening for their organisations in that space, both positive and negative, and particularly if you've got challenges that you feel like you can't get over at the moment, or problems you've got that you'd love to discuss with the group.
I like Julia's comment. Be kind.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah,
I've actually got something to add. James, I met you at Pitch Partners.
I
work with Pete. How you going?
Yes, hey, Pete.
I saw
Pete down there.
Oh, this looks good. So off the back of Respect at Work, we had an appropriate workplace behaviour session run by a client of ours who's a lawyer about what to and not to do, which was a good reminder sort of leading into the silly season. We've also then revamped some of our policies to encompass that proactive approach. So having a safe, respectful and inclusive workplaces policy. So then, you know, the partners have acknowledged, sort of done a bit of a risk assessment just to mitigate any risk that, you know, might crop up. But I think it's a positive indication to our team that we are taking this seriously, and we can't just sort of sit back on our laurels and hope for the best.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. It's great. And I think it was great to see what you guys are doing in general, Julia and Pete, in terms of like really trying to bring business leaders together to have a yarn about this stuff. But I think you're right as well that it is a lot of it, and certainly we're seeing a lot of lawyer-driven sessions around that appropriate bunny ears workplace behaviour. But I think you're right that it does have to be ultimately about, you know, just mutual respect and having policies and procedures up to date to reflect that proactive approach. So it's great to hear that.
We always appreciate the input from our lawyers, Chris and Caroline.
But they all have banners.
We're very good at teaching it. I think that's probably my overarching comment, Chris. I'm sure.
Do as I say.
Have you ever seen a firm implement it? No, just on a side note. I was in a catch up today, which included a safe work inspector, and with respect to the psychosocial guidelines and there being a significant focus of safe work this year, when sort of pressed as to what they are looking for, essentially it's that it has been given consideration. There is some style of policy in place, but are you actually taking action on that policy as well? So, you know, if you have a grievance procedure, is it actually something that works?
Yeah.
And it's
okay.
really interesting because in our experience, previously, complaints of a psychological nature referred to, for example, and I'll call out Safe Work New South Wales specifically, they actually rejected and refused to investigate them. So this is a real turnaround for the books for them in terms of, the impact the Boland Review has had in this space, and then how it's changed behaviour, not only of organisations, but also of the regulators, and the importance that it's gone up on their radar now.
Well, they've got a specific team working out of Gosford now, looking at implementation to help with businesses, and the inspectors do look at it, and it seems like bullying is probably the one that gets raised most of the time with them. But that's a difficult thing for them to go through, and probably a whole different discussion. But yeah, that was kind of the theme that came out of this morning's.
Okay.
Catch up.
Well, I feel like, and it's probably only because I'm a bit more invested in it maybe than others at times, is I feel like the respect at work stuff really, like thinking from an employer's perspective, that actually scares the shit out of me in terms of like, oh, geez, like if you're a director, like I was thinking about, Heritage, any of our financial services sector board directors out there going, ooh, like, are we
have an anxiety attack?
That like just the thought of like how resilient is our organisation to prevent this stuff occurring in the first place? And I'm going to say the answer is about no, 90% of the time, like not very.
So James, I think any large professional services firm is at risk, because actually having visibility across your teams is almost impossible, especially when you've got a hybrid work environment, or you're working on a really big transaction where the client's needs really dictate the tone that you have to take with your own team. So it's something that we're across at our firm, but it's fair to say it's got the partnership fairly focused and quietly terrified that we all know law firms, and especially really large transactional law firms, aren't necessarily the high watermark of avoiding psychosocial hazards or respect at work. That's for sure.
And it's
interesting from experience.
And it's interesting that the resources regulator, so that the mining regulator, has also now placed it very firmly on their compliance priorities for 2023 as well. So, and we all know the background there and some of the issues that sector has faced. So,
and you could say, no, you go, Chris.
No, I was just saying for pubs and clubs as well, where you have to be considering the external factors in the harassment piece. Anyone with a frontline staff member there, customer facing, it's a real concern. But pubs specifically come to mind because we've all seen those uncomfortable interactions. Oh,
that's what I mean. That's anything that where you got a customer facing, and you're right, and then you include alcohol into the mix, and then it's a bit like stand back and hope for the best. But that's what I mean in terms of if you're a director at the moment of an organisation in those spaces, you should be right to feel very concerned and be really asking yourself some hard questions. About what.
And the other industry that I'd call out here would be healthcare, disability services, community services, those sort of organisations where frontline staff also have a potential for enormous exposure to occupational violence or, those sort of, those types of incidents. We've been doing some work in healthcare and community services and supported, a number of organisations through risk assessing those things. But those for-purpose organisations in community services, healthcare, I think that along with the hospitality have a lot of exposure, and particularly the cohort of workers. So when you think about the younger workers that are working in that space, they don't have the experience and those sorts of things that maybe some other workers might have. And I think it was the safety regulator called out younger workers in particular as an area of focus.
Yeah, that's quite topical, Bronwyn, because certainly Sackville before the Royal Commission this week and last week, so the Disability Services Sector Royal Commission that's running, it's actually in Queensland for this fortnight. There's been quite a there's been, and I we may have been attending because we've got people who are on the panel there. But there's certainly been a real focus on, and not necessarily in the vein of respect at work and this legislation, but how are those workers safe, and how does a disability service provider that's a charity fulfill their purpose and protect their staff, and not greenwash in the reporting that goes back to the ACNC in terms of the governance standards that they need to fulfill. So it's certainly at the front of mind, and I don't think I'm out of turn saying that Sackville's got a well progressed draft for his final report. And I think we'll find some of those things really topical around vulnerable people and vulnerable workers and remote and disparate workforces. In that sector.
Yeah, because they sort of, often they'll be one-on-one or, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What's the timeline for the issuing of the Royal Commission report, Caroline? Has he said?
Look, I think it's due October. I think there's an inference coming that it will be later than that, because certainly the public hearings, I think there's going to be an extension of the public hearings in relation to some of the issues that have sort of been raised and re-raised. I suspect
watch this space.
Watch this space.
That's right. And I saw Tom just commented as well. Yeah, definitely the mining industry, another one of significance as well. And I think you're right. So Tom's saying, rural and secluded areas. And I know we've got a few people on the conversation with us today from organisations that service regional areas. And I think that's the other area that we've seen quite a bit of as well, in terms of regional locations with limited talent pools, and then being able to deliver those services in a way that meets legislative requirements. When it's there's often times when you're like, well, I won't specifically name the
labour shortage in all markets, so isn't there?
Yeah. But I mean, I was even thinking where we've been in the last week in the Torres Strait, about the availability and consistency of primary healthcare workers. So, you might have a dentist in some of those communities come through once every 4 months for 3 days, those kind of things. And I think that there's going to be issues around how you manage the psychological welfare of those workers that are providing extremely difficult services in extremely remote locations as well. So
that are very hot and humid. Hot.
That's right.
Humid made my hair go frizzy.
Yeah, looks so frizzy. But so we talk enough. What else is out there in the minds of the people in the conversation today? And throw it in the chat if you're not comfortable speaking out loud. I mean, is there probably what we're hoping to understand is how well progressed do you feel your organisation is around this? Because I think what we're really wanting to leave you with the call to action on is saying, go and review your policies and procedures, get cracking on a risk assessment, have a really good look at what you're doing around the Respect at Work bill, knowing that you've really got till December odd this year to have your house in order on that. And what other issues are you experiencing in that space? Because this is, I feel like, I know I'm speaking to the choir for most of us, but I know Chris and I talk about quite regularly that this psychological injury space, it's like the most, what do you call it? It's the most ambiguous, in a world of ambiguous things, it's really the most ambiguous of all. And you've got this huge, what did you say, Chris, where like work and home collide and things like that, where you've got people that have got pre-existing injuries. Sometimes you don't know that they're there, sometimes you do. It just feels like you're wandering around trying not to step on landmines half the time.
Oh, look, I can guarantee I don't look at a psychological injury on a workers' comp claim where it is solely the cause of the workplace incident. There's always something else going on in that person's life. 100% guaranteed. I just have one thing to share for us as a firm, and you touched on it before, James, and I think it's critical and sort of interesting and exciting that a law firm's looking at it as well, is coaching staff in how to have conversations around development and self-assessment. So we actually have workshops both ways. Firstly, as employees, to understand how to assess ourselves and what these conversations look like. And then secondly, for the managers or partners, as to how to have those conversations. and
That's absolutely
it
critical.
is. Yeah, I cannot enforce it enough that the issues come from how poorly constructed those conversations genuinely are. And I see Caroline nodding her head. It's sort of well, it keeps us employed.
It does keep us employed, but we're not the benchmark to
Well, no, I know, which is why I say from our firm perspective, the fact that we're all undergoing training is.
So what's the goal here? To bring down the productivity of law firms by creating stronger leaders, have better conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can cut in, Chris. So one of the new KPIs certainly for partners at our firm this year is, we've obviously got our professional development requirements, but there needs to be 10 hours of leadership training, and we are doing all manner of things in terms of being assessed on our leadership communication and where our triggers are and how that communication can be better, and that's confronting for me in my mid-40s, and it's pretty interesting to watch some of the feedback from the partners who are in their late 60s and early 70s, because they're our, I'm going to describe them, but they're our risk cohort, because they have done everything the same way for the last 50 years and really successfully. So I'm not going to be entirely critical of them, but they're still getting their head around hybrid working, and they were the first people to return
still
to the
getting
office.
their head around a smartphone, Carol.
Well, no, they're slightly better at that than I think we give them credit for, but we've got a real focus.
Sorry.
There's actually 6 of them here, but they're all on mute. They've got the cameras off.
I'll just duck.
I'm sorry.
But there's a real focus on how we communicate, because I think one of the things we're trying to train our young lawyers and our emerging lawyers is the power, the exact same words become more powerful the more senior you are. So the words that I used as a junior lawyer and the words that I use as national lead of corporate, those same words have a very different impact on the human that I'm talking to in the office. And if I'm stressed, or I've got stuff going on at home and I'm human and have domestic factors that feed into my professional life, then that there needs to be training right at the top to make sure that those words don't have the impact that we're trying to avoid here. And when you've got a firm with 80 partners, we've just got to hope that everyone's having a cracking good day every single day, so that we don't send that downstream.
Yeah. And the other piece that kind of goes with that is that team building and building positive teams, because it is conflict between workers that is recognised as, a real hazard and contributing to psychological injury. Is so building those positive teams with a great culture of working together and those sorts of things can go a really long way in that reducing workplace conflict between workers. So that's something to also consider. And of course, not only conflict then between those the clients and the customers and the workers, but worker to worker.
And we've had real conflict as we've made everyone to return to work or work flexibly, well, probably more the former than the latter, that we've got people who haven't worked with other people for 2.5 years, that putting them back into an office environment with a 1.5 metre desk in open plan has been an unpleasant experience for them. So working out where they work best and where we need to reshuffle the noisy ones, the loud chewers, the cup of tea and the corporate services people, like we've had to rejig the whole floor plan in all of our state offices to not just necessarily just at practice group level or industry group level, but similar working types, because we certainly had a whole cohort of workers who are much more productive at home. Like we measure them in 6-minute units. We know how productive they are. So
6-minute units.
So Chris is with me. So making sure we've got them in the right place. So, not just on the bus, but on the right seat in the bus, so that we get the best out of them and they feel safe.
And I think that's the fragileness I was talking about, Carol.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have come back and been a lot more aware of your environment in that regard. Whereas in 2018, it was just
everyone just sucked it up. It's we've got air conditioning that's too hot, too cold, too noisy. We've got keyboards that are being typed too loudly. It's like, everyone has just become, I'm going to say 30% less resilient than they were.
Tolerant.
All that too.
Yeah. And I think, I guess, so how does
people are the worst.
Well, you could say they are, but I mean, I'm the other way. Like I'm sure many of us in the room, I couldn't wait to get back into the office, and I'm way more productive in the office than I am at home with kids running around and a million distractions. But I guess one of the other things I wanted to add to try and see, just lastly, if anyone else has got perspective on as well, is a lot of what we see in this space as well is this cultural factors, and I think this is just building on even outside of the legal profession, cultural factors where more junior people in the organisation don't feel empowered or comfortable to bring up issues or call out. I'm not even saying call out conduct issues or whistleblow, but to, how would you put it, highlight issues or improvements because they're fearful that that might come across as losing face for the person that's more senior for them. And I think one of the areas of research we've certainly both, Bronwyn and I, have been reading a lot about is creating the right cultural sets of values within the organisation to have forums where it's almost a little, thanks, Sam. You can go in and you know, for this period here, it's almost a little bit like hierarchies don't exist and we're all just going to talk very openly and freely in a consultative fashion. And that can be a very difficult thing to do. And I would suggest that with this psychosocial stuff, people will need to consider that as part of their risk assessment process. Because I saw Tom asking what level of risk assessment do you think we need to look at in terms of, are you saying, I'm sorry, I'm just rereading it again, Tom, are you saying in terms of business units, in terms of whether at an organisational level or at an individual business unit operational level? Look, I would say to answer that question and to hopefully link to what I was just saying, I think you would definitely want to have it listed at an enterprise risk register level. So the board needs to be across that because they've got very specific personal liability in the game. But then I think realistically, I would probably say at an operational level, depending on how many business units you've got, you'd want to have something that accurately reflects the nature and the size of the organisation. So I would say just doing it at a board level is going to be way too high, but doing it at a, let's call it at a totally operational level is also going to be too low. So probably somewhere sort of down the middle.
Yeah, the reason I asked that was because some pockets of the business, such as customer-facing roles, for example, have a high exposure and could be relatively unhealthy in that space. Like, I'm just thinking from a reporting perspective too, like if there's key risk indicators which link to those risks and you're reporting up to the board, you know, a large amount of the result could come from only some business units, like a couple, you know what I mean? But if you're reporting that at a group level, it may be clouding where the problem is, like because you may not actually be breaching tolerance levels or anything like that.
Well, I think, look, I would say it is actually one of those things, and I know because you guys because you're in that financial services sector, you've got a whole bunch of additional sort of, you know, people to answer to and standards to meet. But I actually think it's one of those risk assessment types that you do want to use a more human-centered approach and in a way not get as invested in making it overly quantified around data, but more focused on, I think you're saying about your customer-facing roles. You know, what we've seen is people go, all right, well, our first port of call is absolutely going to be any of our teams that directly interface with customers. They've got to be part of that risk assessment process, and then having the right stakeholder group to actually do your risk assessment. And as you said, not having it all about your customer service, customer-facing people, and having that right mix of, I guess, a horizontal and a vertical cross-section of your organisation, which is an easy throwaway term for me to say here in this environment. It's a lot harder to actually determine, you know, operationally for your organisation. But I think, you want to make it reflective of where the business's risk lies. And I would say, unfortunately, it lies predominantly where your customer-facing services are delivered. Then don't be afraid to engage in that. What do you think, Bron? Like, it's a hard one to answer. There's a lot of things to consider there.
And I would just go with highest risk factor. put that at the, think about it in terms of criticality, and kind of go, well, where am I getting bang for my buck here? What's going to cause me the biggest pain point? Try and find that, and then work your way through from that perspective, and just consult across all of the levels in the organisation to make sure everyone's got their input in on it.
Yeah, and probably just look at where most of your psychological injuries occurred. I know it's a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator, but that's got to be guidance for you as well.
Yeah.
So
can I just say, James, I know I've got to run. Everything that you're talking about is you and I have had a conversation around the team dynamic stuff that we've done. Yeah. And if you want, I can share a link that you can share with everybody around the questions and the info that comes out of it. And I don't know if I shared it with Caroline, but I shared it with Campbell, and he was going to fill it out. It's just 25 questions, but I wanted to say that it measures, and you can get a gauge on how people are feeling in their teams before something happens, because the ones with the lowest psychological safety, there's a lot more workers' comp, mental health issues in that area. So we unpack that and we find out, well, what's the conversations we need to be having? But one of them seeing, because we're specifically, across the disability space, is we're adding a couple more questions around, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And that's really that's relevant for all industries. And there's a lot of conversation around that at the moment, because there's multicultural leaders within our, organizations that aren't able to have they're not having conversations, and people are not feeling belonging. Right. But reason why I wanted to raise it is because everyone's talking about this, but they're not putting it in their dashboards and board reporting. And I think Caroline mentioned it earlier today, it comes from the top. So we're putting this in, we're redesigning the dashboards to say that you need to know, how your teams are feeling, what's the dynamic that's going on, and we can break it down, to a high level detail, but match it up with works comp issues, the safety, how many people are, just doing the lodging claims, or not so much that, but the how many people are lodging incidents and stuff like that. And we can see that if a team's not really lodging an incident, something's going on there. They're not going to get, is the team leader, are they losing shifts if they're speaking up, sort of thing. That sort of thing that we're uncovering. But the stuff that's going through the Disability Royal Commission at the moment, like 100%, we're seeing it, and it's partly why it's hard to get people on board roles at the moment. It's just there's that going on. So anyway, I'll share the link, and I'll chat with you more about it, because it's so relevant in all of the industries that we're across, and I think it's fantastic stuff. So actually, I was going to mention that they're using this with Boeing Defence at the moment, so we're the partner of it, and the stuff that they're talking about there is exactly what you guys are into, what we're talking about here. Preventative safety, psychological, mental health, all that sort of stuff. So
thank you. That'd be great.
All right, well, I've got to jump off, so see you guys later.
No, you're right. I was going to say, look, we have shot the clock, guys, and I feel like I don't know if anyone else feels like this stuff can feel about as clear as mud most of the time. So I would say, look, just to summarise and loop back to the point that we started with, and hopefully we can at least go away going, okay, I feel like I've got better direction on that, is ultimately, as we said, reviewing your internal processes. Let's use that collectively. Doing all the good stuff like Pete and Julia and organisations like theirs is doing around getting some conduct training in place and getting some, professional development for your staff. Definitely doing a risk assessment. That I'm not going to go into any detail on, but look, feel free to give us a yell if you want some more detailed guidance on that, because we're doing plenty of them across a bunch of different sectors. And then beyond that, I think it's all about, as Dave said, creating the right cornerstones of the right culture to actually prevent this stuff rather than just react to it when it occurs. That's probably the message. What does that come close to it, Bron? Did I miss all the important bits as usual?
No, you got the key summary bits, but you guys will all get the deck after today, and we've listed those things in the deck. So if you haven't taken notes, don't despair. This session has been recorded, and will be on our YouTube, and you will also get the deck. So you'll be able to see the key points that we've been stressing from today.
Yeah, and Andrew Hollier just sent through a bunch of links as well from iCare on that as well.
Oh, okay,
to jump off. So yeah, I'll include them. So you get an email with the deck, the recording, and about 15 links. So
and look, in the deck on the very last slide, we've put forward some suggested topics for future community of risk management. We'd love your feedback. Please drop us a line, send us an email, have a look at what we're suggesting, tell us what you want. We'll develop content based on what you guys want to hear about. So please don't be afraid to give us feedback. That's, you know, we love doing this every month, and, you know, we want to bring you what you want to hear about.
Yeah, and I was going to say, lastly, with that too, don't be surprised if you get a random email from Adrian, our EA. It's not spam. She's just in the process of setting up a closed LinkedIn discussion group attached to the community of risk management. So we'd love to have you all join that group. And that way we can just continue to kind of throw up comments, queries, suggestions, support, because we do, as this has always worked, want this to be a peer-to-peer forum. It's not about us just yodeling onto you. We want you guys to chat and get to know each other and, you know, build alliances and
share good ideas and things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Lovely
Thank
to see you all
joining
again.
us.
See you next month.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your week, and bye for now.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.